The year was 1904, and the city of St. Louis was the center of the world. It was hosting the World's Fair, an international spectacle of technology, culture, and progress. But tucked within this celebration of human achievement was the third modern Olympic Games, and more specifically, an event that remains the most bizarre, dangerous, and unintentionally hilarious athletic competition ever recorded. This was the 1904 Olympic Marathon, a 30-mile journey through a hellscape of dust, poison, wild dogs, and rotten fruit. If you were to design a race meant to kill its participants, it would look exactly like this one. The man behind the chaos was James Sullivan, the chief organizer of the Games. Sullivan had a theory. He wanted to test the limits of purposeful dehydration. He believed that athletes would perform better if they didn't drink water. To prove this, he designed a course that featured only 2 water stops for the entire 30-mile run, one at the 6-mile mark and another at the 12-mile mark. After that, the runners were on their own in 90-degree heat with 90% humidity. The course itself was a nightmare. It wasn't a flat track, it was a brutal series of 7 steep hills on unpaved roads. These roads were not cleared for the race. Throughout the day, horses, carriages, and early automobiles drove along the same path, kicking up clouds of thick limestone dust. The runners weren't just running, they were suffocating. The starting line featured 32 athletes, but very few were professional runners. There were 10 Greeks who had never run a marathon, several local St. Louis residents, and 2 men from the Tswana tribe of South Africa, Len Tau and John Mashiani, who were actually in St. Louis as part of the World's Fair South African Boer War exhibit. Then there was Felix Carvajal, a Cuban postman. Felix had raised the money to travel to the Olympics by running across the entire length of Cuba and begging for coins. However, when he arrived in New Orleans, he lost all his money in a craps game and had to hitchhike to St. Louis. He arrived at the starting line wearing long trousers, heavy boots, and a beret. Another athlete had to take a pair of scissors and cut his pants into shorts so he could compete. When the starting gun fired at 3:00 p.m., the hottest part of the day, the chaos began immediately. The first to fall was William Garcia. He was a professional runner from California and was leading the pack for a significant portion of the race. But the limestone dust kicked up by the official cars was too much. Garcia collapsed on the side of the road, coughing up blood. When he was taken to the hospital, doctors discovered that the dust had coated his esophagus and torn his stomach lining. He nearly became the first athlete to die during an Olympic event. Meanwhile, Felix Carvajal, the Cuban postman, was treating the race like a casual stroll. Because he hadn't eaten in days, he was starving. As he ran, he saw an orchard. He stopped to pick some apples, but they were rotten. He developed intense stomach cramps and decided to take a nap in the middle of the race to sleep off the pain. Surprisingly, after his nap, he woke up and kept running. Then there were the South African runners, Tau and Mashiani. They were performing well until they encountered a pack of aggressive stray dogs. The dogs chased Len Tau a mile off course, forcing him to sprint for his life in the wrong direction. Despite this, he still managed to finish 9th. As the race progressed, the professional favorites were failing. Fred Lors, a bricklayer from New York, developed severe cramps at mile 9. He decided he was done. He hailed a passing car, one of the official vehicles, and hopped in. He sat in the back seat, waving at the other struggling runners as he cruised toward the finish line. He drove for 11 miles until the car broke down. Refreshed from his ride, Lors decided to jog the rest of the way into the stadium. He crossed the finish line first, and the crowd went wild. President Roosevelt's daughter, Alice, was even about to place the gold medal around his neck when someone pointed out that he had spent half the race in a Cadillac. Lors claimed it was just a joke, but the Olympic Committee was not amused. He was banned for life, though the ban was later lifted. With Lors disqualified, the real leader was Thomas Hicks. but Hicks was in a state of total collapse. At mile 20, he begged his trainers for water. Sticking to James Sullivan's no water theory, they refused. Instead, they decided to give him a stimulant. In 1904, there were no drug tests, and sports science was a dark art. His trainers mixed a concoction of egg whites and 1 milligram of strychnine, better known today as rat poison. When that didn't perk him up, they gave him a second dose and a large glass of brandy. Hicks began to hallucinate. He thought the finish line was still 20 miles away when it was right in front of him. His skin turned gray. He lost the ability to move his legs properly, so his trainers literally carried him over the final hills, his feet dangling and shuffling in the dirt. When he finally entered the stadium, he was a walking corpse. He was so drugged and dehydrated that he had lost 8 pounds during the race. He crossed the finish line, was declared the winner, and immediately collapsed. He was too weak to even stand for the medal ceremony and had to be carried out of the stadium by 4 doctors. He later said he would rather die than run another marathon. When the dust literally settled, only 14 of the 32 starters had finished. The man who came in fourth was Andrein Carvajal, the Cuban postman who had stopped for a nap. If he hadn't stopped for those rotten apples, he likely would have won gold. The 1904 marathon was so disastrous that the Olympic Committee nearly abolished the event entirely. It remains a staggering example of how far human beings will go for glory, even when they are being chased by dogs and fed rat poison. It was a race where the winner was poisoned, the runner-up was a fraud, and the most successful athlete was the one who took a nap.